Okay, welcome back to Sip and Talk. This is, number 3 for today. I'm feeling it. Seriously drained.
You and me both. It's like that old saying, right? The more you work,
the more work magically appears, yeah. Feels a bit like trying to fight corruption, actually. The paradox we're diving into.
Good analogy. But hey, lots of data coming in. We got to process it for you all. And yeah, we got the requests. Guess the topic.
Oh, let me guess. China. Again.
Bingo. Seems like you, our listeners, really want us to keep digging into this. But okay, before we get to the main event, the anti-graft stuff, we got to set the scene, right? The big picture.
Absolutely. Quick look at the global stage first. You know, Trump's tariff talk, what's happening with oil prices, that whole mess.
Exactly. Lay out the international pressures. Then we pivot. We tackle that core question everyone's asking about China's anti-graft campaign. Is it, making the CCP stronger, long-term longevity?
Or is it just fancy political infighting that's actually creating huge risks, a liability?
That's the tension. Longevity versus liability. So let's start with the chessboard. The tariffs, the oil, the diplomatic dancing.
Sounds good. Where do we begin? The Xi-Trump meeting.
Yeah, let's start there. It's confirmed October 30th, South Korea. Big deal because it's the first time they'll meet face-to-face in Trump's second term.
And the markets, predictably, jumped on that news, right? Especially tech stocks. A little bit of hope for things cooling down.
A little bit, yeah. But it's fragile hope, because hanging over this whole thing is the threat of massive tariffs from the U.S. side.
Right, let's get specific. This isn't just tinkering around the edges. What's the threat exactly?
We're talking a potential additional 100% tariff. 100% on a whole lot of Chinese goods, supposed to start November 1st, just days after they meet.
Wow, and that's tied directly to China playing its rare earths card.
Precisely. It's retaliation, basically. Beijing put in these new controls on rare earths. And it's clever, the way they did it.
How so? What are the specifics?
Okay, so it's not just about exporting raw rare earths from China. Their rule says you need government approval for any product that uses Chinese rare earths. Even if, say, a company in Vietnam makes something using Chinese materials and then exports the finished product back to China.
Whoa, okay, that's a serious choke point. They can basically turn off the tap for anything high-tech.
Pretty much. It's a switch, like you said. They're signaling, push us too hard on trade, and we can mess with the whole global tech supply chain. Some analysts think they're using this, to get concessions on other things. Maybe Taiwan.
Changes the whole game. It's not just about prices anymore. It's about the fundamental inputs for everything.
Okay, so if the U.S. is really thinking about 100% tariffs, they must be getting their legal ducks in a row. That kind of thing always ends up in court.
Oh, definitely. They're already prepping a new Section 301 investigation. That's under the Trade Act of 1974. Gives the USTR broad powers to retaliate against unfair trade practices.
And they're linking this back to the 2020 trade deal. That's the plan. It seems like they're doing it now because they might lose the authority they've been using under IEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
So they need a different legal justification ready to go just in case the emergency powers get challenged or expire. Smart, in a sort of economic warfare kind of way.
Exactly. Proactive legal defense. Okay, so that's the U.S.-China tariff tension. But there's another big piece causing ripples energy costs. The oil shock from the Russia sanctions.
Right. What happened there?
The U.S. hit 2 huge Russian energy companies with sanctions, Rosneft and Lukoil. These guys account for something like half of Russia's oil production.
Half. Wow. And the immediate impact.
Oil prices jumped 5% in a single day. Biggest jump since mid-June, I think. That gets everyone nervous about inflation, obviously.
But the big question with sanctions on Russia is always, do they actually work? Russia seems pretty good at getting around them.
Yeah, that's the paradox, isn't it? They've gotten really skilled at evasion. Their oil shipments by sea actually hit a 29-month high recently. They use this shadow fleet of older tankers, dodgy insurance, operating outside the usual rules.
So the sanctions drive up the price for everyone else, but Russia still manages to sell its oil. Who's buying?
India is still the biggest customer, taking in 5, maybe 6 million barrels a day. And they're getting it cheap, of course. It works for India's energy needs, and it keeps money flowing to Russia.
Okay, but I saw something that maybe changes this picture slightly. Something involving China and Russian oil?
Yes, and this is potentially huge, especially right before the Xi-Trump meeting. There are reports that major Chinese state-owned companies are thinking about temporarily stopping purchases of Russian oil that comes by sea.
Temporarily stopping? Why is that such a big deal? China usually ignores U.S. sanctions, right? They've been buying tons of Russian LNG, for example.
Exactly. That's why it's significant. If China even temporarily pulls back, it suggests the more pragmatic, rational folks in Beijing might be winning the internal argument ahead of the summit. It's like a goodwill gesture.
A signal that they value a trade truce with the U.S. more than cheap Russian oil, at least for now.
Right. It definitely makes a positive outcome from the Xi-Trump meeting seem, well, a bit more likely. It lowers the temperature.
Interesting. Okay, so while the big powers posture, other countries are trying to navigate this, right?
Yep.
Playing their own game. India and Brazil, you mentioned.
Yeah, the not kneeling strategy, as some call it. Look at India. They were getting slammed with U.S. tariffs like 50% total, 25% base, plus another 25% penalty for buying all that Russian oil.
Ouch. But they negotiated their way out of it.
They did. They managed to get upgraded from basically third-tier status back to first-tier. Tariffs are set to drop way down to like 15 or 16%.
Okay, what did they have to give up for that? Must have been something significant.
Two main things. First, easing restrictions on imports of U.S. non-GMO corn and soy meal. Big win for American farmers. Second, and this is key, they promised to gradually reduce how much Russian energy they buy, especially through state companies.
Gradually, that lets Modi save face a bit domestically, but still tricky politics for him, especially with the farmers.
Very tricky. Shows how tangled domestic and international politics get. Now, Brazil. Lula wants to meet with Trump, which is interesting in itself. They also got hit with a 50% tariff. What was the official reason?
The official reason was kind of vague, something about persecuting the former president. But you're saying the real reason was different.
Oh, yeah. The underlying issue was stopping Brazil from getting too cozy with China on finance, specifically preventing them from helping internationalize the RMB, the Chinese currency, or doing anything that looked like de-dollarization in the Americas.
The dollar. Don't mess with the dollar's dominance. So what does that mean practically for Brazil, using RMB for trade?
Yeah, like settling big trades, soybeans, for example, in RMB instead of dollars. Even small moves in that direction are seen as a major threat in Washington. But it seems high-level talks involving people like Senator Rubio have smoothed things over. The U.S. feels Brazil got the message.
So those tariffs on Brazil are probably coming off soon.
Looks that way. It really underlines how often tariffs are political tools, not just economic ones.
Okay, but let's talk economics for the average person. These tariffs do cause inflation, right? How much of that cost actually hits consumers here?
Yeah, they definitely add to inflation. The data shows back in like 2018, 2019, consumers were eating about 70% of the tariff cost. Now it's shifted a bit. More like 40% is passed on to consumers.
So importers and exporters are swallowing the other 60%, squeezing their margins.
Pretty much. So yes, tariff inflation is real, especially for specific goods.
But if that's happening, why isn't overall inflation in the U.S. totally out of control?
Good question. It's because other factors are pushing the other way. A big one is deregulation, especially in energy under the Trump administration. That helped keep key costs down.
Like gasoline prices.
Exactly. The national average is hovering around $3.05 a gallon. That's noticeably lower than during the previous administration. So the higher cost of imported stuff is being offset somewhat by lower energy and transport costs domestically.
So it's a balancing act. Managed. For now.
For now. But it all really hangs on keeping oil prices stable. If something happens with Russia's sanctions that really sends oil skyrocketing, that balance gets thrown off immediately.
Okay, that's a perfect setup. We've got this tense global backdrop. Now let's pull back the curtain in Beijing, the anti-graft war. This has been going on for, what, over a decade?
More than that, yeah. Since late 2012, early 2013.
And the core question people ask is, why is corruption still such a massive problem after all this time? Why do critics say it's just political theater?
Well, the contradiction is kind of baked into the system itself. The campaign is popular, no doubt. People hate corruption, but it doesn't fix the root cause.
And the scale of the campaign has been immense. Millions of party members investigated or punished, hundreds of very senior officials taken down. You'd think that would make a dent?
6.27 million party members, 417 high-ranking officials. The numbers are huge. But the problem is structural. It's what some call the rule of man system. Power is just so centralized.
Meaning the leader's authority trumps actual laws or independent checks?
Pretty much. There's no real independent supervision, no free press to expose things, no powerful civil society groups, no truly independent courts. They're all suppressed or controlled by the party.
So the power to fight corruption ends up concentrated right at the very top, which makes it, ironically, the perfect tool for getting rid of political rivals. It's legal, it looks legitimate.
It's the ultimate dual-use tool. Politically brilliant, especially early on, tapped right into that historical idea of the clean official, hitting tigers and swatting flies. Built up huge personal prestige for Xi Jinping.
But the underlying structure the party controls everything hasn't changed. So corruption didn't disappear?
Nope. It just mutated. It went underground.
How so? What does it look like now?
It become much more hidden, for one. Less about obvious bribes, maybe, and more about complex financial schemes buried deep inside state-owned companies, big infrastructure deals, or in really opaque areas like defense spending or the banking sector. We're talking billions, not just millions. It's harder to spot.
Which brings us to the latest round of purges. This really fuels the argument that it's more about political control than clean governance, the liability side.
The scale of the recent purges confirmed at the Fourth Plenum is pretty staggering. 14 Central Committee members or alternates kicked out. That's a record. And 8 of them were high-ranking generals.
8 generals. And there was a shift in who was being targeted this time, wasn't there? Not just old rivals from previous eras.
Exactly. They're now purging people who were actually promoted under Xi, people considered one's own.
Yeah.
The charge might be incompetence or corruption, but often it boils down to perceived disloyalty.
So if you fail to deliver on a key goal, like maybe military modernization, it's not just incompetence, it's political unreliability. And that gets framed as corruption.
In that kind of high-pressure system where loyalty is everything.
Yes.
Failure easily becomes disloyalty, which then becomes corruption, providing the justification for removal.
The military purges really stand out, losing 25% of the military members on the Central Committee, including former top brass. That's huge. What's the thinking there? Just consolidating control.
It's definitely about consolidating absolute personal control, yes. But it's also likely about tackling deep-seated corruption within the military that was hindering modernization efforts. Specifically, this whole culture of paying for position.
Paying for position? You mean literally buying ranks and promotions?
Yeah. Reports suggest that for years, maybe a decade or more, promotions, command posts, even lucrative contracts weren't based on merit. They were based on who could pay the biggest bribe to the right people higher up.
If your generals bought their way into command, that's terrifying for military readiness.
Exactly. You can't modernize an army effectively if it's fundamentally corrupt at the command level. So the purge is partly political control, partly trying to actually build a more effective fighting force. You need loyalty and competence.
Okay, and then there's the political drama around former top leaders. This really hammers home the idea that political loss has absolute consequences. Hu Jintao being escorted out of the 20th Congress.
That image was unforgettable, deliberately public, in front of the world's cameras. Him looking confused, the leaders around him avoiding eye contact.
The message seemed pretty clear.
Critics called it a public execution of his remaining political influence. It signaled to everyone in the elite. When you lose the power struggle, you lose everything. Even the traditional respect for a former leader doesn't apply. The rules are different now.
And then, not long after, the sudden death of Li Keqiang, the former premier.
Yes. Li Keqiang, seen by many as representing a different faction or power center, died very suddenly after retiring. Officially, a heart attack while swimming.
But given the context, the timing, the Hu Jintao incident, it fueled a lot of suspicion.
Understandably so. Whether justified or not, the perception among many was that this fit a pattern. Those who fall out of political favor, who lose the struggle, face grim consequences. It reinforces that the struggle is the most important thing, and the stakes are incredibly high.
This zero-sum game must have a chilling effect on how officials behave day to day. If losing means potential ruin, maybe even death.
It creates perverse incentives, doesn't it? Maybe encourages grabbing what you can while you're in power because you might lose it all if you fall. And it definitely leads to caution, extreme caution.
Which leads to that bureaucratic paralysis thing, lying flat. 不作为.
Exactly. If making a decision, even a necessary one, carries the risk of being blamed, maybe accused of corruption or disloyalty if something goes wrong, why risk it? The safest path is often to do nothing.
And that inaction grinds everything to a halt. Local economies suffer, debt problems get worse because no one wants to sign off on tough decisions, social services slow down.
Right. The anti-graft fear works to enforce loyalty, but it simultaneously undermines effective governance. It's a major side effect.
So how does this internal tension, the need for economic progress versus the overriding fear and focus on security, show up in their big picture plans, like the new 15th five-year plan?
You can see the balancing act right there in the plan. On the surface, they talk about getting back to economic construction as the center. That's language meant to reassure businesses, foreign investors, maybe signal things are normalizing.
But what's underneath that surface language? What's the real priority?
The emphasis is heavily on national security and self-reliance, which is code for building up domestic industries to replace imports, insulating the economy from outside pressure, especially from the U.S.
So despite the rhetoric about the East rising, the actual strategy seems more defensive. Protect what you have.
That seems to be the core objective. Regime security. Guarding the rivers and the mountains, as they put it. It's about survival and resilience first, even if they talk about growth. If you're busy purging generals, you're probably more focused on shoring up your defenses than projecting power outwards aggressively.
Makes sense. Okay, let's wrap this section by looking at the party's own framework for beating corruption long-term. The 3 no's strategy.
Right. They talk about 3 stages. First, create an environment where officials dare not corrupt. That's the high-pressure deterrence, the fear. Second, build systems where they are unable to corrupt. That's about institutional controls. And third, foster culture where they are unwilling to corrupt. That's the moral transformation part.
Okay, they've definitely achieved daring not. The fear is palpable. Unwilling. That's a long-term cultural project, maybe impossible. What about the middle one? Unable to corrupt. The systemic part.
That's the massive hurdle. That's the fundamental flaw, you could argue. To make people unable to be corrupt, you need real checks and balances, independent courts, a free press, things that can actually hold power accountable from the outside.
But the party actively prevents those very institutions from emerging because the party leads everything.
Exactly. So their solution is self-supervision. Internal discipline bodies like the CCDI, the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, it's powerful, yes, but it's still part of the party, reporting upwards. It's the system policing itself.
Which is inherently limited. It can always be used politically.
Right. So they're kind of stuck. They can't achieve unable to corrupt without undermining the party's total control, which means they have to rely constantly on maintaining the fear, the daring not stage.
Through endless purges, endless political campaigns, a protracted war.
Yes. And that reliance on fear and constant struggle isn't really a recipe for stable, efficient government. It creates its own form of instability, even as it tackles the corruption problem. It's a deep paradox.
Wow. Okay, let's try to summarize this complex picture. We've got the global stage, tense with potential trade wars hanging on the Xi-Trump meeting, oil prices as a key risk factor.
And China signaling maybe a slight pragmatic step back on Russian oil as a gesture. Meanwhile, other players like India and Brazil are skillfully navigating the pressures to their advantage.
And internally, the anti-graft war is this permanent campaign, essential for legitimacy and control, reaching right into Xi's own promoted officials and deep into the military, driven by this need for absolute loyalty and competence, defined through a political lens.
The fates of Hu Jintao and Li Keqiang send a chilling message about the consequences of losing the political fight. It's absolute.
So the core takeaway seems to be, the anti-graft war is a double-edged sword. It shores up legitimacy by hitting corruption people hate, but because it's fundamentally political and lacks real external checks.
It simultaneously injects instability. It leads to bureaucratic paralysis, forces corruption into more hidden systemic forms, and locks the regime into this cycle of perpetual internal struggle and fear.
Which brings us to that final provocative thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. Considering how deeply ingrained this struggle philosophy is in the party's history and structure, is it even possible?
Yeah, is it possible for a system built on such centralized, absolute power to voluntarily create institutions that would genuinely limit its own authority, like truly independent courts or media?
Or is the price of maintaining that absolute control inevitably this kind of constant zero-sum internal political warfare?
That question, how they answer it or fail to answer it, will likely shape China's path for a long time to come.
Well, that was quite the journey through geopolitics and internal Chinese dynamics. Thanks for walking us through that.
My pleasure. And just a reminder to everyone listening, we're reporting on the analysis and perspectives we've gathered. We're not taking sides here, just trying to lay out the different dimensions of these complex issues.
Absolutely. The goal is understanding, not endorsement. Please keep thinking critically and independently. It's your best tool.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Sip and Talk. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next conversation.
And definitely check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. He's got great memes, spirit tastings, always fun, and the latest vlogs from his travels in Europe. Good stuff over there.
Definitely check Mickey out. All right, that's it for us today.
We'll see you next time.
Bye now.